great. It's good to see you. I'm excited
Good to
for a
see you
little
too.
Ask Us Anything energy. So, this question comes from a fan of our work, so much so that they were in a session of ours recently. And they came up to me and pulled me aside and asked me a question. And I've decided to take the liberty of piecing it together in black and white for me to read because I thought I was kind of stumped. I mean, I wasn't like, eventually, I think I had an intuition, but I think it's a really good one. So here it is, Katie. I just turned 40. I'm from the Bay Area. I'm a practicing attorney, and I recently became the director of a nonprofit board. The executive director has some questionable practices. I'm new, he's the founder, but I have no idea how to broach addressing my concerns with him. What do you recommend in terms of pacing and transparency? How do I not just sit with this information and the awareness I have and take action? And I think like behind that is like in a responsible way.
Yeah.
So what I hear is you've got someone who's deeply invested in this organization, the founder. Founders are, I mean, you're a founder.
We know.
Right? Very attached, as you should be. And someone who's kind of been around, but in a new position of power. So, sort of like looking at things from a different angle and is coming to some awareness that is a little unsavory, at least for her. So, that's what I see. What do you hear and feel?
Yeah, it's I mean, a couple things are coming up for me. Some really resonate from personal experiences.
Yeah.
Others just thinking through elements of ethics and ethical practice, thinking through how do we set ourselves up to effectively give and receive feedback, but also this person has choices, they have agency, and wanting them to be able to make the right choices for themselves, whether or not the executive director takes that feedback and does something with it. I think those are the three things coming up for me.
Well, I'm going to ask you another question and then I want to hear more about those three. So, especially, we both have experience working in nonprofits.
Oh my goodness, yes, we do.
Yeah. And I have recently, and I'm not sure your experience, I've recently joined a board of a nonprofit. So I would call myself relatively new about like sort of knowing like the dynamics that can exist. But I've loved a lot of people who have been on boards, maybe even been chairman of the boards. And there just is a lot to say about like the relationship between boards and founders and executive. So is there anything in your experience that you that feels helpful to share? We're both smiling. I mean, it's like there should be a reality show were it not for the gravity of the causes that these organizations support, right? Like, I think I couldn't laugh at it on Bravo because it's just, there are high stakes. But anyway, what do you think?
Well, and it's high stakes because I have perspectives. I have so many perspectives. I'll put in a plug for a book. It's called The Revolution Will Not Be Funded.
Oh, yes.
About how nonprofits
Write
came
this
to
down.
be in the absence of government support
Yeah.
for solving these problems that likely need a governmental solution. So it's called The Revolution Will Not Be Funded. Talks a bit about the nonprofit industrial complex of which we were both a part and walked away with some trauma, workplace-induced trauma from. But I think, I mean, the challenge is the power differential between the board and the executive director, the board and the organization itself. For those of you who are not super familiar with nonprofits, many times if you're sitting on a board, you have to give or get a certain dollar amount every year for that organization. And the last thing anybody wants to do is lose a board member, because of the dollars and the purse strings that are attached to that. So
Mhm.
with that being said, one might say that our participant, attendee from a program, today's listener actually has power, and a
Mhm.
lot of negotiating power at that.
Mhm.
With that being said, as you noted, the executive director is also the founder. And I'm not sure what those agreements between the board and the executive director slash founder actually look like. But I would encourage the listener to remember the power that they do have as a member of the board. And part of the reason that they're there
Yeah.
is to kind of serve as the person who's constructing the sandbox for the organization to play in and to deliver those services.
Yeah. That what comes up for me just in what I know from being on a board and, when I worked at a nonprofit, sort of witnessing, you mentioned at the front end of this, ethics. So let's talk about that, and when I think about that, it's governance. So
Mm.
what are, and you and I love, we love a conversation about clarity
Yes.
and expectations. And I can definitely get down with ethics, but why don't you share a little bit about when you brought that up? What you was it related to what we're talking about now, or was it unrelated?
I think it's all related.
Yeah,
It's all interconnected.
yeah.
The ethical part of it for me is there's like, and we've talked about this before, there's global ethics, right? This, or
Hmm.
moral ethics. What is it's more Let me back up. I am just mixing and matching too many words today. Who do you think I am, George W.
Plus,
Bush?
ethics is
Um,
hard to say. Ethics.
yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Hmm.
So there's morality, there's ethics, there's philosophy, there's lots of
Hmm.
different disciplines. But for this listener, what's coming up for me is what is the mission of the organization? What are the values of the
Hmm.
organization? And we never want someone to hold a mirror up to us and say, "Hey, I'm doing a check on your ethics. I'm doing a check on your ability to be congruent, to be genuine and authentic." It just feels rotten and puts people on the defensive. So
Hmm.
instead of holding up a mirror, being able to say to the executive director, finding that connection between the observed behaviors that she's experiencing and whether or not these align or are congruent with the mission, vision, and values of the organization. And
Yeah,
just starting there, because it's hard to deny, for a founder to deny what the organization was founded on and then not acting with integrity, consistency, and congruence with those values.
yeah, yeah. And what I hear inherent in that approach, which is something that I think we're always going to answer with for this listener, is first of all, I really want to say great work on slowing it down and being curious about what actually is at play here.
Mhm.
And appreciating, that Katie, when you and I talk about getting and giving feedback, and we pull, of course, a lot from Dare to Lead, in terms of establishing trust, like this is a slow process sometimes, right? And it's a very intentional process. So I'm appreciative that she's curious. And I think what you're saying is like, be curious about not so much like the intentional disregard
Right.
of values, but like, out of desperation or who knows what's going on. What what do you make of how you might approach something that could be seen as like a violation or egregious in some way?
Yeah. I mean, in that case, I mean, and look, I
You're
have
like,
had my
fire
own.
the asshole.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
right.
I have been this listener,
Ugh.
and I have not approached it the best way every time because
Yeah.
I didn't get curious. And just as a general as a general statement, when you are new to an organization, do not go in and tell them everything that they're doing wrong and how you're going
Mhm.
to fix it right away. Give it time, take it in, absorb it, try and understand why it is the way it is. You're there, you wanted to be there for a reason, and it's not because they've completely messed everything up. I've been guilty of not giving that grace
Mm.
and just coming in like a bulldozer to make it better when in fact people have already been trying to make it better.
Uh-huh.
But to your point, if it's egregious, or if we think about it in terms of delegation and a time management matrix, it is both important and urgent when it is egregious. And so not necessarily having to fully engage that curiosity and socialize the idea with other members of the board, other staff, which is what I might encourage when there is more time, when it's not urgent, but it's really important, taking the time to do that. When it's urgent, addressing things head on, being clear with the executive director about what's coming up for you, and also the consequences of what continuing down this path might mean for the organization, for the founder executive director, for members of the board, and how are we caring for the people in that stead? And is this decision making, or is this action in their best interest? Because it's not just about the executive director slash founder anymore. And for a long time, it probably was. So
Mhm.
they might not even be thinking more holistically about decision making because they've never had to.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking about I have so many questions for this
I-
listener or participant. We're just going to call you a listener. For this listener,
yeah.
because I wonder a lot about tenure. I wonder about the scale that the organization's growing. I wonder about like fundraising sources and everything like that. But I think the piece that I want to say with some as a declaration is you have to say something.
Yes.
So if there I don't know that she's necessarily like I'm not going to say anything, but I can hear in the question the tension of like how to say something.
Hmm.
Um
Hmm.
and I guess, in terms of she mentions pace and transparency, like I'm curious about what their relationship is like right now.
Hmm.
How long she's been on the board or as the board or the director. Are they at a place where they're, having casual chats and texting memes and gifs, or are they kind of seeing each other at the quarterly meetings and that's it? I would imagine it's more intertwined. But I think, this gets back to like normalizing a culture that gives feedback. And
Hmm.
I wonder for this listener, like, what is this organization's relationship with feedback? Is it normalized? How do you know it's normalized? Um, and then has the founder had an opportunity to get feedback before in a really light, sort of low lift way, right? Like it's just what we do, you
Hmm.
know? Because if this listener's really facing like a cultural shift that's needed, and I'm sort of going like all the way to that side for a second, part of me really wants to encourage her to like slow it down and get the data.
Hmm.
There's a variety of ways to do that, obviously, focus groups, surveys, facilitated engagements, interviews. But I really don't know what this founder's appetite is for that, you know?
Right.
And I also I hate when teams or groups get together to talk about quote unquote problems at the company when the problem isn't a problem at the company. There's a person who's the problem.
Hmm. That isn't being held accountable.
Correct.
Um,
Right. Then why am I sitting in this room having to go through all this stuff when we all know it's Joe?
mhm.
You know, like that's annoying. So anyway, any thoughts on that?
I mean, so many, and it's
Yeah.
it's tough wanting wanting something a little more concrete, right? But to your
Yeah.
point, this listener brought it up in conversation with you. We're talking about it here. It's clear to me she wants to do this in the most effective way possible.
Hmm.
And so that has to count for something too. And so even starting off, one, eh, people are like, oh, if I put it like send out a calendar invite, should it say tough conversation or
Yeah.
like whatever it is? I would ask for time to be able to say, hey, there are some things on my heart and mind that aren't sitting quite right. Are you open to us putting an hour on the calendar later this week or next week?
Hmm.
Very difficult for someone to say no to that because you're not saying, I want to give you feedback. You're saying, I have
Mm.
something I need to get off my heart, get out of my head.
Hmm.
And so it's clear there is a weight and a significance to that conversation. So that person is prepared for it, but still kind of unsure what it might be related to. And when stepping into that meeting, simply sharing, I've been wanting to approach this in the right way. I might make a misstep or two. That is not my intent, is not to cause harm. My
Hmm.
intent is not to take you down a peg. My intent is for us to have a dialogue and hopefully help get me some clarity so that we can move forward together. And softening the conversation in that way and setting that as the tone can really be helpful because what needs to be said is, I don't agree with these practices. Help me
Hmm.
understand where they came from, why they're persisting, and where this will get us. Um,
Hmm.
that is much better received with everything coming before it than just saying, I don't agree with this. And why are you evil? Um,
Yeah. Right. I'm imagining, so this is not a role play, but just imagining like, I don't, sort of the response being like, I don't know what you're talking about. Everything's going fine. We're
mhm,
meeting all of our fundraising. So the defensive sort of response.
yeah.
Part of me, I think that's what we're afraid of when we're approaching conversation. I know for me, oh my God, I used to spend a lot of time in this. Now I spend what's less than a lot. It's not a little, whatever's between there. Enough, too
Enough.
much still. It's still too much time.
I like that.
Like imagining imagining all the things that they could refute with
Hmm.
and stealing myself for that kind of argument versus what I want to invite this listener to do, which is exactly what you just said, and permission once you sort of get a read for like the absorption rate of this,
Hmm.
like is it
Hmm.
0? Is it 100? To be like, you know what? Maybe we can try again another time, or you seem really frustrated. Like getting maybe you don't back out, although I'm giving you permission always to walk out if you need to. But like, calling in that sort of defensiveness to get curious about it. And this, I think, is where leaders are probably listening and they're like, what? You're asking me to be like a therapist. You want me to say, go on, tell me more? And I'm like, yeah, I do.
Yes. Those communication skills are not just reserved for us.
No, that's
They're for
true.
everybody.
Yeah. Because I think too, this person, she's female. I don't know the gender of the other oh, he's the founder. So also, I just want to bring that out too. Like,
Yeah.
she's sort of being courageous and saying like, I want to talk about this. He very well could be defensive.
Mhm.
And what some possible ways forward are when you encounter that.
So my favorite tool to
Yeah.
use is actually naming what it is you're experiencing of them in terms of their emotional response.
Hmm.
Geez, Mr. Founder, it seems like you're angry. You seem defensive. I'm picking up that you're irritated at this conversation. Is that accurate? And then that person has to say, yeah, I'm frustrated that you want to talk about my like
Yeah.
whatever it is. And that usually brings folks down because when they get into that state, I don't believe for most folks it's intentional when we go into that stress response, and we show up angry, frustrated, irritable, defensive. It's not who we are at our best, and so giving that person the opportunity and then holding up the mirror to say, "This is what I'm picking up from you. Is that accurate?" That slows things down a little bit, allows them to say, "Yes, it is," or "No, it's not." If the answer is yes, back out and be like, "You know what? It was not my goal to make you defensive. It was not my goal to make you angry. And I don't think we can have a productive conversation until we're both back on the same emotional ground, or a more calm
Mhm.
and even ground." So if the
Mhm.
answer is yes, I also give this listener permission to back out. If the answer is no, help me understand, why are you so frustrated by
Mhm.
this topic? Or help me understand where this anger is coming from. I'm getting curious and trying to learn.
Mhm.
What happened to you that is causing you to show up this way with me? Um,
Mhm.
do not elevate yourself to that level.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Agreed.
you'll hold on to the power. But oh my gosh, the power differential between men and women. We could talk about that for
Yeah.
multiple episodes. I also see, no, if she's picking up some of that, being able to name that for him too.
Mhm.
I'm experiencing, not just a power differential between our roles, but experiencing some behaviors from you right now in the way that you're speaking to me that I'm not sure you would be leveraging if you were in conversation or dialogue with another man. Now,
Mhm.
I've said that before. It didn't go well. And
Huh?
it didn't go well for me and later didn't go well for that man, who was held accountable by superiors or perhaps now held accountable by the rest of the board.
Mhm.
And so say what you mean what you say, and you really can't go wrong. And remembering they need your money. Like, you are there to do exactly what we hope you will do, which is
Yeah.
say something. Um, but it also shows you who's running this organization if they're not available and open to the conversation.
Yeah.
Do you want to be a part of that?
I think it's very common when there's a new leader for people to scamper a bit and wonder about like what I used to do, founder, executive director, will it be received well with this new change in leadership? And I think, part of part of the fear that I've had in the past, and this is just, in my own experience, is like, will the shortcuts I used to take still work?
Mm. Mhm.
Right? Or will, gosh, there was this one time very formative in my career. I'll never forget this. Shout out to Mike DeVilling, a former supervisor of mine. I lied. Like, I lied at work. The question was, did you send the press release out and to this spreadsheet? And I was like, no. I tried to recall it. That caused all kinds of things. Anyway, the reason I bring it up is like there is a
Oh,
real.
so you did send it.
Oh, yes, I
Like,
did, but I knew it was wrong that I did it, and so I said I didn't do it, and I should have gotten fired, and I didn't get fired. Um, and I bring that up because I have no idea what the founder has done or hasn't done, right? Or is disclosing or isn't disclosing, or if there's whatever these questionable practices are. I really think there's an opportunity when you call someone in for the behavior to really change.
mhm,
And that was my experience. It was what I lied and tried to cover my tracks because I was afraid. And I was afraid that, I wasn't going to meet the targets. And Mike said to me, he's just like, you can't ever do this again.
mhm,
And we're going to give you a second chance. And I gotta say, like, never. I mean, I was what, 24,
mhm,
But even if this founder is 55, 54, whatever, there is an opportunity, I think, to sort of make it better if he receives the feedback and makes a change,
yeah.
So there's a lot of uncertainty too going into those conversations because I think, you and I, as both managers and leaders, it's like when you give someone feedback, you really want to see that they take your feedback.
Mhm.
So I bet part of what this listener is afraid of is like, well, what if it's just like he doesn't do anything with it? And then what do we have to do? Um, so I guess, Katie, I want to make sure I go back because you said you had three things that came up for you. Did we cover them in the course of our conversation? Or do you remember what the three things were? I th-
It was ethics, giving and receiving feedback,
Yes,
and then elements around it was there and now it's gone.
I
The
saw it
the
there.
power differential, you saw it
Oh,
just
good.
happen.
I did.
Look at the power differential. But in the
Yeah.
giving and receiving feedback piece, I think the question, Emily, you ask at the very end is important. And it's important that the listener,
Yeah.
if you give the feedback and it's not taken and it's not integrated and it's just kind of brushed off, you get to make a choice for yourself now. The
Yeah.
boundary for is not for the executive director when you give the feedback. It's for you and what
Right.
you're going to do. And so being prepared if the executive director does not take the feedback and does not do anything with it, my question back to the listener is, what is your next choice going to be? Are you going to stay on the board? Are you
Mm,
going to try and engage the rest of the board? Are you
yeah.
going to leave? Do you have to report this to some kind of financial agency or to the police? Like, there are so many other elements here. And so my question isn't how is he going to respond? Because we can never control that. It's how are you going to respond in the event that this person does not take that feedback on board?
Yeah. Brilliant. And that, oh my God. Is it any wonder why some people don't want to do this, right? Like direct, lead, right? It's hard.
Hmm.
This is the stuff that I think on the other side of it, God, the best, right? It's hard. And on the other side of this conversation could be like the best version of this
Hmm.
person,
Yeah,
and I feel like what this listener speaking up does is give both of those things a chance, right? Because this isn't working. So let's just see, you
agreed.
know? Yeah, if you step up or if I step out or something in the middle. Who knows? Oh my gosh. Well, do you feel whole? Is there anything else you want to say about this particular issue? I
I
feel great.
I don't think
I'm
so.
ready. I'm
No
fired up.
new value to add.
Put me in front of this guy. I can't wait. I don't even know what's going on. I just want to talk. I am so grateful for the questions that we get and want to encourage folks listening. Hi, listener. We're really happy you're with us. Something tells me you have a question too. Maybe something even that was sparked as a result of us answering this question, and we would love to hear from you. You can drop us a DM on Instagram at Who's Missing Podcast. You can submit a question on our website at who'smissingpodcast.com/ask us anything. You can text us. You can come to our events if you're a part of our client base. We don't have any parties on the horizon yet, but there will be some. But yeah, ask us anything. We mean it.